So I'm going to share my screen now, Jenna, okay?
Perfect, sounds great.
Very good. Hi, folks. My name is Jane. I am a team member of Sharper Training Solutions. We are a training resource for many of the libraries around Long Island, and we offer many of the computer classes, as well as some really cool stuff as far as streaming and a variety of things that can help you use your computer and even your cameras to their fullest potential. So if you want, I can give you that website so that you can see what other classes we offer, not only at your library, but other libraries as well. Tonight is an intro to Excel. I'll be going over all the basic features of Excel. I'll be getting into formulas and functions and other formatting concepts that you can use within Excel. It's a Windows-based course, but if you do have an Apple, if you do have a Mac, the application pretty much is identical. What we do in a Windows environment, you can do in a Mac environment. What really changes is the keyboard structure. So you'll see, you'll hear me say, this is how to do it versus with a keyboard versus with your mouse. So whatever platform you're on, what we do here tonight, you can use on either one of those platforms. To start Excel, so this is of course the Windows screen. Over on a Windows environment, you have your start menu. On this version, which is Windows 10 for me, you click that button and you will get a listing of all the applications that are on your systems, as well as a small panel or a grid aligned to show you your latest, the ones that you use most often. But on the left-hand side, you could scroll down until you see Excel, and notice it's right here. They have used, instead of Microsoft Excel, they call it Excel, thank goodness, so it pops up rather quickly. And you can click on Excel, and that will start the application. You should see your Microsoft splash screen with Excel, the version number, and then in my case, I come to this new. Automatically, it wants to start something new. Your default will always be a blank workbook. These other options are templates in Excel, and I would encourage you to, if you do see these templates, to take the time and go through them. They're short, they're brief, but they're chock full of great information on how to maneuver, move around, and just give some of the other pointers that you may really get to use later on. But right now I'm going to click on my blank workbook. And by doing that, I am into an Excel workbook. So what is Excel? Excel is a number crunching package. That's what it's used for mostly. It crunches numbers like no other application before. If you're of the generation where you were aware of Lotus 1-2-3, Lotus 1-2-3 was the competitor for Excel back in the 90s and into the early 2000s. But Excel, Microsoft took this to a whole new level. Lotus was called 1-2-3 because it could do number crunching, which is its primary function, but it also could do databasing on a singular level and charting. Well, Excel can do that too, and Excel just kept taking it further and further along, that now Excel is the premier product for number crunching. So just a little history there. When you come into Excel, you get your title bar. So most of you know the title bar exists along the top. But what I want you to realize in Excel, what happens over on the left side of your screen, you get something called a quick access toolbar. So with these down levers, if you have version, I think it's 2013 and beyond, which most people will have on their newest systems, you'll have that quick access bar. When you come into Excel for the first time, you're going to see Book 1. That is the title, that is the name of a brand new workbook in Excel. You get to name that as you start entering data and giving it a location so you know where to look for it and by what name you've called it. So you want to keep it relative to what you're entering. But a workbook. So a workbook is very, very similar to the green ledger books you may have seen or maybe even used to record your checkbook, for instance, or any types of debits and credits. But a green ledger book was a series of columns that held fields, debit field, the credit field, the balance field. And then you filled in rows, and the rows really held your records. So the same concept is true here for Excel. I have a bunch of columns and I have a bunch of rows, and the intersection of a column and a row is called a cell, hence its name. But this is a column. The columns are designated by an alpha alpha letter, excuse me, and the rows are numeric. And the intersection of a column and a row is, again, the basic unit in Excel, which is a cell. Kind of sounds like bingo after a while, because I'll be asking you to say, tell me where M5 is or H10. So when you talk in pairs, you'll be talking about a specific location in Excel of a cell. So you have a workbook and you have a sheet residing in a workbook. Now, when you buy that green ledger book, realize you buy the green ledger book based on how many columns you wanted. You know, you could only buy 5, 7, and then you went to those really long ones if you were into accounting that had many, many columns. And then you had pages. So there wasn't one single page, like a one single sheet we have here. Realize that in Excel, we can go way past the column limits that book provided, as well as the sheet limits that when you had to buy a book. So you are in essence looking at that green ledger with infinite amount of possibilities. And we'll talk about those momentarily when I get into the structure of your worksheet. But I just want you to go along that top. So in the title bar, when you do see something called book 1, or if I asked for a new book, it would come in book 2, ask for a new book again. It gives you the sequential numbering of books. That name changes when you save it. All right. Going below that title bar, we have your menu bar. So right now I'm looking at File, Home. Notice the green line is under Home to let me know visually where I am on the ribbon. Then I have Insert, Draw, Page Layout, Formulas, Data, Review, View, and of course, Help. As you click on these different menu items, this ribbon here, this area here, as in all Microsoft products, is called a ribbon. This ribbon is broken down into categories with related icons. So for instance, I'm on the Home tab. This is the clipboard ribbon with several icons in it that are all somehow related. In other words, it has the cut and copy symbol, which every application allows you to do. And then once you cut and copy something, you can paste it. So they are the icons that are somehow related to the clipboard. Moving over here on the Home tab again, this category has to do with all the fonts that I can change to and all the formatting that I can apply to my text and once I start typing. So just to give you an idea, this is alignment. You'll see that the categories, as you move through Excel and then you start using all these other menus, you will see more and more of the icons and features that Excel has to offer. And it's phenomenal. It really is crazy what Excel can do from the start of this application. But for tonight's sake, we're going to stay on Home because Home will give us pretty much everything we need to do for data entry, to start playing with functions, to start playing with formulas, and then of course to format some of our data. So again, it will be a hunt and peck for you for a while to figure out what icon I wanted and what icon does what. They tried to be pretty clear with their icons. For instance, cut, you all know that's a scissors. 2 images in any application is to let you know, hey, you can copy the application, you can copy whatever you've highlighted. So just be mindful of that. Some are not too intuitive. You'll see that as you go along, like a bolt for an idea might not be as intuitive as some people would like, but you'll get used to it. The more you use Excel, the more you'll get accustomed to where the buttons are and what their purpose is. Underneath that, this area here is really key as you move through your understanding of Excel. This area right now, this name box, whenever you hover over an area, a tooltip, which is the word name box right now, a tooltip will pop up to let you know what it is you're hovering over. So right now, this name box allows you to see where your active cell is. And if you notice, the green box that's at the intersection of D and row 2, that is my active cell, hence it's why it's in the name box. If I click it over to H4, notice the define area up here now changes to H4. So you're never lost. As long as you can see this area up here, you'll always know where Excel is, or Excel has its eyes, because your eyes and Excel's eyes may be in 2 different places. So it's very key for you always to be aware before you go and do something to know what Excel is looking at. And I'll show you that as we start putting data in here. This area here will become more alive once we start using the formula bar. Again, the formula bar is where you will see what you're putting in a cell. If you put text, it's going to be a one-to-one. Whatever text you put in a cell, it's going to appear as text up there. When it changes is when you start building formulas and functions. So we'll talk about that momentarily as well. But the big part of the screen, your big real estate, is in fact your worksheet. So your columns, as we talked before, are designated by the letter A, B, C, D, E, F. This will move out to Z, and it pops up with AA, AB, A, and so forth. This will continue for as long as you need it, all the way out to column XFD. And that provides an incredible amount of columns for you. So have I ever seen anybody use the whole sheet? No, simply because of the amount of memory it would take, and you would need an incredible amount of RAM if it had to process that much data. But it is there for you. So you can go all the way out to that area if you need be. The same is true for rows. So not only do you have over 16,000 columns to play with, but as far as rows go, it depends on what you're seeing, depends on your screen. On a laptop, or if your rows are really wide, or if you zoom in, you'll see fewer rows. Right now I'm seeing row 1 through 22. But suffice it to say, when you saw how many columns there are even more rows. So I'm just literally hitting the page down key on my keyboard to move that active point. And if you notice, my defined box right above the A column tells me I am on column A, row 243. Well, the bottom of A is at row 1,048,576. So as you can see, one worksheet can hold over 17 trillion cells. Would you ever want to fill them up? No, but some people who have to do huge imports of data will fill up a good majority of them just with data as opposed to calculations. So realize that you have an incredible amount of real estate to work with here. Most people, though, stay up in this top left quadrant of your worksheet, because that's what you come into on every workbook and every worksheet. So realize that most of the time you stay up in this vicinity. Other things, let's start putting stuff in. So tonight, we're going to work out, say, a budget. We're going to talk about budget, maybe savings, and how to go about putting something together for 12 months to see where we can possibly budget for next year. And then play with some things that you can do in that. So in column A, I am going to move down to row 2, and I'm just going to say, these are my expenses. And then by hitting the Enter key, I move directly underneath expenses. So one of the things you will want to learn quickly is how to move around your worksheet and entering data. So right now I am in a downward mode. In other words, I typed expenses, it goes into that cell. That's the only word I want in that cell. And then I hit enter. The next thing I'm going to do is then start listing out those categories. So on a, I'm going to put mortgage as one, and that's all I want to put in there. You're not limited to how much text goes into a cell, but you don't want it to become a word processor for you. Again, realize you're number crunching, but you can insert an incredible amount of text in a cell and then format it as such, as boxes, as text boxes. But right now we're going to do what's referred to pretty much as a simple table with labels and numbers. So I'm just going to put a few things down here that you may have to pay for. Notice as I type, what I'm typing in the cell right here is also appearing up here in my formula bar. Remember, as before, text will appear one-to-one. So as I type the word insurance, you see it come up here. It's almost like a redundant field, but momentarily when we start playing with numbers, you'll see why that formula bar becomes so important. Notice right now I am typing insurance and for my car. I'm hitting the enter key down below. I want to put in insurance again, but this time I want to put into it for house. If I start typing the first letter of a word that already exists in my column, notice Excel's intuition. It says, wow, do you want this again? And if I did, I could just say, I could just hit enter or move it in there, and notice it would lock it in. I could then come up in this area here, or I could stay here. This gets a little crazy, and I'll show you why in a moment. I could actually say, well, I really didn't want it to say car. Now notice in your formula bar here, again, exactly what's in my cell, I can now take my mouse. Now, the cool thing with your mouse is you really have to watch its personalities, and they're ever so slight. For the most part, you see this big open crosshair. That open crosshair allows you to randomly select your cells. As you move through the worksheet, it will change its icon. So notice here I'm back in insurance. I move up here, and now notice it looks like an I-beam or a dog bone, as I call it. That's to let you know that you are in an area that has text. And if you wanted to, I could click up here. Notice that I-beam positions my insertion point. And it's your insertion point that you want to look for to see where you want to either insert or modify text. So here, notice I'm going to backspace car out. And instead of this one being my insurance for my car, I'm going to just type the word house. I'm going to hit the return key like I did before. And that's how you can modify information that's in a cell. By default, if I'm on a cell and I don't edit it and I just stop typing, I'm going to type categories here. Oops, if I can spell categories. Notice the difference. I literally typed over, in essence, replace the contents of the cell, which previously was expenses. So just be mindful. If I want to completely change the cell, I just click on it and start typing. It will automatically replace what was there. As opposed to if I wanted to modify it, I could click on the cell. Oftentimes it's easier up here because it will show you everything had I filled up in a lot of text. But I could just highlight the word house and I could actually say facility. I can hit the enter key to lock it in, And sure enough, that's a quick way of keeping part of the cell. I didn't want to have to type insurance over and just replacing the one word. All right, so some great editing tools. A lot of people get a little frustrated because when they click here and they say, oh, I just wanted to say car payment, and they just start typing the word payment. No, you have to remember, come up here and click again and then add that word payment. Questions so far? Okay, data entry will be your biggest, I'm having a hard time spelling payment tonight, my good Lord. There you go, payment. Any questions regarding entering data at this point? I'm literally just typing and hitting the enter key, but the key is if you're on a cell and start typing, it replaces. If you come up here, you can modify what's in the cell already. Everybody good? So please feel free to add the chat or talk in the chat. I see something. Since this is what you might want to change. Thank you. Smart woman. So I'm going to go back to say expenses. Oh, Lord, I'm still doing that one. Expenses. Tonight, the fingers don't want to type. All right. So another thing here, when we start entering data, please realize that as I type in a cell, it will fill the width of the cell. And by default, all of our column widths are the same. Expenses fits there perfectly, as does mortgage, but notice cell phone, insurance, car payment, insurance facility seem to spill over next door, which in fact they are doing. Watch when we put now the values for our first month. So our first month is going to be January. I literally typed that in, and it should be down on that field. So realize if you put it up here, you can start moving things as well. So I had January up here, but notice it probably should be on that line. Because if I go to put in mortgage, so say for instance, I'm going to start adding the values for my expenses. Mortgage is going to be what, 2,500 I'm going to budget for. My cell phone, I'm going to say is possibly $300 a month. My car payment, well, it depends. Your car, for the insurance for a car payment, you often get that as an annual cost that's broken down monthly. You can do that in Excel as well. So we'll figure that one out. And then the same is true for home insurance. We can do that, we can break it up. And I'll show you how to do that. Other categories, just to add more things here, might be water, sewer. So just to give ourselves a few more categories. And water is one of those bills that I'll say $30 a month, and the sewer is possibly $40. So let's talk about what we've done so far. We've added text. Text, if it's a cell and it fits in the cell, you'll see everything that you have in the cell. If it's spills over into this cell, now notice here, I'm just gonna put the number. My car payment's gonna be maybe $230 a month. Look what happened to that. It actually cut off the hyphen and car payment. It doesn't delete it, it just cuts it off and hides it because the cell currently is not wide enough to handle that text. The same is true for facility. Right now, my I'm gonna say my home insurance per month might be about $200, I'm guessing right now. And we'll get a better handle on that in a moment. But this point is just to show you what happens when a cell is too, information in a cell is too large for the width of the column. So with that in mind, let's start editing some of this text. January. January really is in a wrong cell. Remember I told you the open crosshair is typically, you'll be, you can select cells using that open crosshair. Watch your mouse now. As you position the mouse down towards any border, and it could be any one of these borders, go right to the center of the border. You're going to get a four-headed arrow that allows you to click and drag it anywhere you wish. Notice, as long as I do not let go of my mouse, it still hasn't landed. I just want to put it there, so I'm now moving it to B2. When I release my mouse, notice January has moved. That's the quickest way, folks, that you can move data around your worksheet. You literally go to that border and you click and drag it anywhere you wish. I'm going to put it back there. Numbers. Notice that when I entered numbers, they were right aligned in the cell as we know numbers to be set up. So the digits align. So you have your ones, tens, hundreds, and thousands, and so forth. When you enter numbers, please just enter the raw number. In other words, don't put the $ if it's $1. Don't put a %, don't put the commas, anything like that. Because believe it or not, that's just formatting. And when you go to save your worksheet, especially as they grow in size, you really want to keep the size of your file to as low as it could possibly be. So the formatting is one of those things that Excel can take care of rather quickly. So when you do put in your numbers, right now you don't know if I'm paying my mortgage in dollars or oranges or M&Ms because it's not formatted to currency. So keep that in mind because you can easily format your numbers using the home number category on your ribbon. And there's lots of formats for a number. By default, Excel puts the accounting number right there. And if you click on it, notice it changes my 2,500 to 2,500 with 2 decimal points, a comma, and a $sign. So in a click of a button, you automatically know what we're talking about. We're talking about currency here. The other thing here, notice I'm dealing in whole integers, so I don't need to see the decimals. Excel puts these quick buttons right here. You can either increase them or decrease them. With every click, it will decrease 1. So I'm going to hit it twice to get it down to that 2,500. So that's how quickly you can format various text in Excel. The other type of formatting is to your field headings. So for instance, you might want to see expenses and January in a bold format. You want it to stand out. So here I'm highlighting 2 cells. Anytime you highlight more than 1 cell, you're highlighting what's called a range of cells. So in a range of cells could be anywhere from 2 to thousands if you wanted to do something to that many cells. So in my case here, I'm just highlighting 2. I'm going to hit bold. And notice it has changed those 2 cells to have a bold formatting applied to them. Now let's go to the columns. Now we're playing with text formatting, number formatting. Let's format our columns so we can see them. And there's a number of ways of doing that in Excel. The beauty of Excel, there is no way to do just one thing. I can have a keyboard shortcut. I have a mouse way of doing things. So there'll always be multiple ways to do something. And again, it's your habits, it's your style that you get into. So with that in mind, when you want to change the width of a column, once again, watch your rodent. When I position myself above a column, I get a down pointing arrow. Once again, that mouse is changing. A down pointing arrow just lets me know that you can highlight the column. I really want to change the width of column A. So if I highlight column A, you don't even have to highlight it. But if I position my mouse on that border between A and B, hold the mouse button down, notice as long as I'm holding the mouse button down, the width pops up. And right now it's telling me that it's 8.43. If I move it to the right, it will change the size. So I could pull it all the way out here to allow for a very, very wide column. That probably isn't the best way of doing that right now, simply because insurance car payment is the longest width in that column. So the cool thing to do is position your mouse between the columns and simply double click. By double clicking, oops, I did that too fast. By double clicking, Excel reads the entire column, looks for the longest string in that column, and then widens it according to that. So now notice, I had this, I'll do it again. I had this all the way out here. This was way too wide. I simply double clicked with that vertical line with the two arrows, and it, in nanoseconds, adjusted that column width to the longest text string it read, which was in A5. So again, that is a quick way of changing the width of a column. Same is true for a row. If you had a longer row, you could do the same thing. You could, excuse me, increase the size, the height of your row by just going between the row numbers, clicking the mouse and dragging it down. So that's how you can resize a row. Double clicking right now will just provide me the default size because there's nothing in row 1. All right. So some of the other cool things that you have. Now, noticed on the 2500, I've already applied this formatting. I could literally highlight the rest of these all in one shot and then click the $sign. It doesn't have to be, a one-to-one. I don't have to do one cell and then go click the $sign, click another cell. I can click a range of cells, pick the formatting, and then get rid of those decimals, all with just the efficiency of doing it once. So just keep that in mind as you go through it, because oftentimes you have to do formatting to a lot of information, and you don't want to do it one at a time, because that just kills your resources. Questions so far? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have this go out till December. So just to give a handle on what I'm building. I'm building a monthly budget for 2021. So now January, I'm going to add the other months. Well, Excel allows patterns, and if it can figure out a pattern such as months, you don't have to do the typing. For instance, January, as you all know, is followed by February, March, April, May, and so forth. Excel only knows January to be the same thing. That now, if I go to the corner handle, once again, here comes that mouse at changing its personalities. Now you have an open crosshair that selects. You have a four-headed that moves around. Now a new one is this corner box. You all see that corner box? If I hover over that corner box, once again, the mouse changes, but this time it changes just into two perpendicular lines. We call it a crosshair. If I take my mouse, I click on that crosshair over that box, hold the mouse button down and start dragging, the system, intuitively enough, will present to you the next months that should follow. And when I get all the way out to column M, notice it says December in my tooltip, and I now can let go of that mouse, and sure enough, the system knew to fill that area in with the various months that came after January. Really cool. That's the ability for the system to fill in a pattern. And there's lots of patterns. There's lots of patterns in our life that we might not even think of. So just to give you an idea of other ones. For instance, you all know Monday. I type Monday, I go to that crosshair, This time I'm going to drag down. Notice tooltips are popping up with the days of the week. Pretty cool. Same is true for quarters. If you are doing any type of information that where you're breaking down quarters, you can do Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. It saves on typing, it saves on mistakes, it saves your time. It's fantastic. The only one thing that it can't work out is numbers until you give it a pattern. So for instance, I'm going to type the number 1, I'm going to go to my crosshair, and wouldn't it be cool if it just knew enough to give me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so forth. But it doesn't, because the number 1, or any number for that matter, by itself, Excel says, hey, I can't guess a pattern from this singular number, so I'm just going to copy it for you. So that's what this little box here does. If you notice, you have a little box next to that square after you drag it that says, hey, if you didn't really want to copy it and you wanted to fill it, you can quickly change it just by electing the option in the box. Pretty wild, huh? And now, if you liked that, this would still copy, but if you give it a pattern, so for instance, if I just supplied, I'm going to do it here, 1 and 2. Oops. 1 and 2. Highlight those and then drag it down. The system can detect a pattern just by those 2 numbers. So your choice. You can do this box here and tell it to do a fill, or if it was wrong, you could do a copy. Now notice it's all going to go to 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Or the other way is to give it those first 2 numbers and then do a fill down. Really neat stuff. So anytime you have a pattern that you want Excel to perpetuate, all you have to do is start that pattern out, and then Excel will try to make sense of it. If it can't make sense of it, it will do a copy. All right, questions about that? And just so you know, if I had said here, some people like to see it in just 3 letters. If you did just 3 letters, Excel will work out the formatting of that as well. Pretty neat. Saves a phenomenal amount of time. So we talked about entering data, we talked about modifying data, we talked about formatting data. What about deleting it? Notice I have this redundant information up here. I don't want to get rid of the row, which I could do. I just want to get rid of what I've highlighted. So there's a delete capability up here that will typically delete your structure. So notice when I click on this button, it did delete my row. So be mindful, this has to do with cells, and this gets a little confusing because you thought you were deleting just the content. No, in fact, this deletes the structure. So I'm going to do one of my favorite commands in all applications, and that's the undo key. In every application, there's this ability to undo. For keyboard people, it is the Control Z as in zebra key. But if I click the undo key, it allows me to undo my last command. In this case, I hit the delete. I didn't want to delete the structure by deleting a row. So that was a mistake. Anytime you feel that aha moment and you say, I didn't want to do that, remember the undo key. It's a wonderful, wonderful capability. So I'm just seeing my chat is blinking. How do I highlight titles again? Titles. So let's see. The titles here, I literally, with the open crosshair, I click and drag until I let go. When I let go, they're all highlighted. Now the difference here, so now I want to delete my content. I have it highlighted on my keyboard. There's a key that has the word delete on it. By tapping the delete key on my keyboard, that will delete the contents of those cells. All right, so be mindful of what it is when you see delete up here, because you do have different options, but again, try to think of these as the architecture of the worksheet. And we'll talk more about that as I move through this. So the same is true for down here. All of this stuff down here, I no longer need because I want to get back to showing you folks the budget. So to do that, I click on Monday with that open crosshair. I click over and down, and by tapping the delete key on my keyboard, I delete the contents of all those cells in one fell swoop. Okay, really cool. All right, so let's go back to our worksheet. Now that you know that we can copy, we can fill and do all of those type of cool things, we're going to work through this worksheet rather quickly. For instance, mortgage. My mortgage payment pretty much stays steady for the entire year. So I am going to take that fill handle, click on it, and I'm going to drag it all the way to December because it's a number and Excel's not going to really be able to make a pattern out of it. So by default, it's going to copy it. It's going to copy the formatting and it will copy anything else that I've done to that original cell. Again, don't feel you have to do them one at a time. For my showing you tonight, I want you to get so accustomed to doing things that redundancy is the best teacher. But for efficiency, I would take this whole range here, I would highlight it, and then I would take the fill handle and move it right across to December. So now in one fell drag, I have all my months filled in. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. But the majority is done. By that, I know now I can go back and on certain months, I know what my bill is going, my budget's going to change. For instance, cell phone. I know come May, my cell phone bills skyrocket because of colleges and kids coming home, and it just goes nuts. So I can change May's to 450. And that's how it, notice, remember I told you before, if I click on a cell and just type, I overwrite it. That's exactly what I did there. Same thing is true for my cell phone in December. Come December with all the holidays, once again, my cell phone bill tends to go up. So I'm just gonna over budget for $450 that month. Okay? Now down here, what would you typically put? I'm pretty much done, I wish, of adding all the expenses that I have throughout the year. And here on this row, I would put my total. Now we're gonna start talking about formulas and functions. So let me pause for a minute, make sure anybody has any questions for me before I go on to formulas and functions. If you have anything about entering text and numbers. So far, so good? Please feel free at any point to unmute if you do have a question. In the total, now I'm going to drag you out the long way first, because if you had a pen and paper and you were to add January expenses, you would take the number value and add. So you would take 2,500, add it to 300, add it to 230, and so forth. In Excel, you do things a little bit differently. Because those values may change, you really want to add the cell structure to your formulas. So I talk about formulas, I talk about functions. Let's define them first. A formula. A formula is a user-created calculation. So in our case, we're going to build a formula just so you get the hang of it. Anytime you want a cell to represent a formula, you must start the cell out with an equal sign. Notice so far, whenever I typed text or if I typed a number, I get what I typed. When you put in a formula, you want the system to do something. You want it to calculate. So therefore, that equal sign must be present first. So the equal sign, depending on your keyboard, should be at the very last number key. And it shares the plus sign on the keyboard. Now, if you have one of the larger keyboards, you might actually have a calculator pad that may even have an equal sign out there as well. So just depending on what keyboard you have, you may have two, but the one that you will have is the one that's next to the backspace key. That's where you'll find the equal sign to type. Again, now I'm not going to type 250 in there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the cell I want it to add. So I typed equal first, and then I'm going to click on B3. Notice I have B3 in my cell, in my formula bar, and I have dancing the neon lights to let me know, hey, this is the cell. Again, Excel is extremely visual in allowing you to see what you're doing and where you're doing it to. So B3, what is my mathematical operator? In our case right now, it's the simple plus sign. So the plus sign, if you're on a shortened keyboard, you'd have to hold the shift key and hit that same key next to backspace to get the plus. And if you have a number pad, excuse me, there's a plus sign out there. Now notice plus, it's waiting for you to add your next cell structure, the dancing answer now off of B3. So let's go ahead and click on the next cell, which would be B4. B4 now, notice the color coding. Excel, as it moved along in its progress, started using color coding so that it allowed the user to see and match what it has added. So once again, I'm going to hit the plus sign. I'm building that formula. Simply going to click on B5. Again, a new color. I'm going to hit the plus key again, B6. Hit the plus again, it's B7, plus again, B8. This, in essence, is a formula. User created. When I am done with it, you do not want to click anywhere else because as you noticed, when I clicked, I add to my formula. So there's two ways to lock it in. You could hit the green check mark up on your formula bar, or as the word, the tooltip pops up, you also could hit the enter key. Your choice. The difference is the check mark locks you in, keeps you in the cell, as opposed to if I hit the enter key moves me down. So just be mindful of what happens depending on what poison you picked on that one. So there's my total. Again, it's a formula. What are the other mathematical operators? So please realize that you have your plus sign, you have your minus sign for subtraction, asterisk. Asterisk is going to be your multiplier, and the forward slash that's on the bottom of your question mark key, that will be your divisor. So that's how you would divide a number. And again, we can play with a variety of things to show you how to use those here. So we talked earlier about home insurance, right? And I kind of guessed it was 200. So down here, I can, or in the cell, it doesn't matter where I do it, but I just want to give you an idea of what happens here. So say your insurance broker tells you, well, your insurance is really $2,800 a year, right? Now you know that you have to break that down by 12 months. You could easily do that within the cell. I could click on this cell here, and instead of it being a flat number, a static number, I could have it be that calculation. I could say equal 2,800 divide by 12. I click the green check mark, and there is my number that I have to budget per month for that insurance fee. So I was kind of close, but by the end of the year, I would be way off by, over close to $400 of that I under budgeted. Again, this is a calculation, just like anything else that you use this fill handle for. I now come to the corner, I get that dark crosshair, I click and drag over. Notice it overrode that static 200 number with my dynamic function, calculation. So again, you just created a formula. A formula is a user created. All right. So I love doing those type of things. Any questions about, and we can play more with these as we go along. We use the plus one here. I tortured you on this one because formulas are user created where functions are predefined. So in our case here, I forced you to build the formula, but realize that there is a function that will do that for you. And that function is the sum function, which if you noticed up on your ribbon, you have the sigma button, which is the sign by any college, university that has fraternities and sororities. They always seem to have this symbol. It's a Greek symbol to sum. I'm in column C. I'm on my total row. I'm under February. I click that sigma button, that sum button. One click shows me what it will propose. It automatically starts the cell out with equal. Again, Excel needs to see an equal sign in order to know a calculation is being asked of it. Here, it uses a function's name, and there are hundreds of functions in Excel. Sum is just one that's used so widely that it gave it an icon on the ribbon. You can use the green check mark to lock it in. You could hit the enter key, or you could hit the Greek sign again to say, okay, that what you proposed is good. And now what it does, it actually did the same thing as your formula, but because it's a function, it's far more efficient. When I click on it, notice here it says sum and in parentheses. So you're going to see that functions use arguments. In other words, there's a syntax to every function and that you have to follow. And as you grow in Excel, you'll learn the functions for all the, learn the syntax, for all the functions you need. So in this case, it's real straightforward. It's equals sum, and then open parentheses, C3, which is this first cell in the range, colon. Colon means through and including C8. Close the parentheses to lock it in. Once you lock it in, you get to see the result of that function. Remember I told you before, the formula bar is not always, what you see is not always what you get, because in this instance, the function is up on your formula bar to let you know what you did to get that result. So here, when I click on it, it's just a static number. But notice when I click on a function, it gives me the full extent of what that function was. Same here, it gives me the formula. It doesn't give me the result. All right? So same as anything else, I can take that function and I can drag that over. And sure enough, in a matter of no time at all, I now have pretty much my entire worksheet for the year built. Questions? Okay, so just to reiterate, notice November and December, they don't fit. Double click, widens that column. Pretty cool, right? If, and in a lot of situations, people do not want to see all the dollars on their raw data. They literally just want to see it on their totals because it convolutes the eye. You can highlight all of this and you can actually remove the dollar format. You can put it back to general and notice there my function for my insurance now has all of those decimal places. And I'm just going to highlight all of those and tell it to decrease it. There's other things I could do to do that as well, to round and whatnot. But just for what we know for a learning tool, I'd rather show you how to use that decrease or increase decimal point again. So there you have it. There's your budget. September doesn't fit, so you double click. So there's other things that you might actually want to see over this as well. For instance, you might want to put a title up here that say, what does this represent? And you could put it in A1, which we're going to do. So I'm going to enter in A1 that this is my home budget as of September 2020. Now, for me, that looks a little odd. It resides in A1, but I really would like it stretched over all of my 12 months as well as the category. And there is a wonderful capability that allows you to do this with a click of an icon, and that is your merge and center option. Notice I have my stuff in A1. I'm going to highlight A1 through and including the cell that is going to end it. I have all that highlighted, and I simply click merge and center, and sure enough, I now have that one cell merged with all 13 cells, and it's represented by A1. So you do have the ability to make many cells into one for centering purposes and for display purposes. I could then change the font. Notice by default, we have one font here called Calibri. I'm going to change it to another font. Here you get to see all the fonts in your system. You can scroll through them. There's lots of them. I would stick to things that have very straight structures. It's just cleaner on the eye. That's why Calibri is your default. But some of them you'll notice are very fancy. They have lots of feet and lots of scripting to them. They're called serif fonts. I'm just gonna pick, I think I'll stick with Arial. And then I can pump that font up. So for instance, I can make it larger so it does stand out. When you look at your point sizes, if you could keep 72 in your head, because 72 points equals an inch. Now, when you print this, it will be really, really large. But if you're doing labels for binders or whatnot, realize that if you needed an inch, you'd go to 72. Anything less than 72, 36 is half your inch. And then if you really start cutting it down, notice it looks more appropriate for reading. And in this case, that's when you would want to open that row up that we talked about before. And you could then start using your alignment formatting icons. So the top alignment, watch what happens to my text. So this is how things are represented in the cell. Home right now is stuck on the bottom as the gray icon shows you. If I click top, now my text is up towards the top of the cell. Center, of course, is going to center it. And now if you put it on the bottom, it puts it to the bottom of that cell. So I'm going to click in center just because it's a title. And then now the same is true for these, where this puts them in the height of the row. This will put them into the alignment of the cell. So if I wanted over to the left, I could. If I wanted centered as I had it, that's what merge and center does automatically. Or if I wanted over to the right, I could do that as well. But that's what these alignment icons do for you. All right, the one thing, now you've worked so hard on this, it's 10 after 8. I've been at it for some time. The one thing that I didn't do, should I have a power surge right now, I would have a real problem because I didn't save it. So the key to all of your work is to save it, to make sure you know where you're putting it and to what name you're going to give it. Needless to say, this workbook is going to be about my budget. So I'm going to give it a proper name, not book 1. To save, I'm going to use the file command. Anytime you're impacting your file, it's file. And now notice I can have a save. That's when it already has a name. Save as, which is what I'm going to use right now. So by clicking save as, it's going to ask you where you want to put it. These are the places that I've been today, as you can see. These are older files. I typically go to my browse folder, which will take me right to my Explorer, my file management system. And now notice it's going to put it in the documents folder. Everybody has a documents folder. It's how Excel by default puts all your stuff. And until you start creating other folders, you could just use the document, build on it. So right now I'm just going to ask for a new folder. I'm going to say, okay, give me a new folder. And I'm going to call this budgets for 2021. Now that's the folder. I say open the folder. And now I get to name it. The file, the actual workbook, is going to be my home budget file. And I'm going to save it as a type Excel workbook. This is by default. You want to leave that there. You want to leave this type as an Excel workbook. So when you go to open it again, your computer system knows to associate it with the application Excel. So now that I gave it a name, I gave it a location, I'm going to click save. And now notice your title is called Home Budget. So if you did get up and leave right now, you close your system down for the night, your work is now saved and you can go back into that tomorrow. You don't have to rebuild it. You'd never want to rebuild something you worked so hard on before, you know. Questions? How's everybody doing? So far, so good. So you know how to change the width of a column. You know how to change the width of a row. We know how to move stuff around. Again, if you click and drag with that corner handle, not the corner handle, excuse me, the four headed arrow. And down here was just your mathematical operators. And this was a number that I wanted to show you how that we could build another formula based on that number and break it down over the course of the year. All right, so I'm going to delete that now because we don't need it. Highlight it, and I'm going to go on my keyboard and just hit the delete key. So some other stuff that we're going to do. That was our budget. Let's talk about our income so that we can get a feel for how much money we're going to have left over. So in this area, I'm just going to quickly start entering data. So for instance, I'm going to put my income salary. So salary. So say you made $75,000 over the year. Here you're going to do that 75 divided by 12. 75, that would be 75,000 divided by 12. And that's how much you make a month. What other income do you have? You might have income from interest at the bank. So say you had $100 a month from interest. You may have dividends from your retirement. So you could put how much you get in dividends. Say, for instance, maybe you got $225. So now you want to total your income, right? So over here, we're going to put that another label, total income. And at this point, you're going to do your function. Again, we could do the formula, which would be equal this cell plus this cell, plus this cell. But again, functions predefined. The sum is used so often, all you have to do is click on it. It gives you that proposal. It says sum, gives you the syntax that it needs a cell range. In our case, it's B12 through and including B14. I like that. I'm going to click the green check mark and boom, there's your total income. In one swoop, we're going to take that all through our months. And now notice you have your total income. So let's now build a formula to figure out how much we have left over after we do our expenses. That is going to be a formula, which again, user defined, you're going to create it. And you start the cell out once again with that infamous equal sign. So you put equal, and what is this? We are literally trying to figure out what we have left over. So we take our total income, and now you're going to use the mathematical operator for subtraction, which is the hyphen with a minus key. And we're just going to click on the total for expenses. Remember, don't click on another cell here. If this is what all it's going to be, use the green check mark or the enter key to lock it in. And there, in fact, is what you have left over. Again, you can take this, do a full swoop all the way over for each month. All right, out of that, now you have this left over. What are you going to do with it? Well, for one, you might want to bank 15% of this. So just like you created formulas before with the plus, we'd use division, we use subtraction. Now let's do multiplication. Once again, you're going to start that off with the equal sign. And what do we want to save? We would like to save 15% of our delta. So I'm literally going to click on that number, the number that we've determined is left over after expenses. And we're going to use the asterisk key to multiply it out by 15. And watch this, folks. I can use the shift key to put that percent sign in instead of the 0.15, lock it in, and there's your 15% of your delta that you're going to put in the bank. Now, I saw someone had a question. Let's see. So is it different for May and December? The numbers are different for May and December only because in May and December, I upped my cell phone bill for those months. So yes, because of the dynamic nature of Excel, anytime I change the number. So for instance, I say my mortgage is not $2,500. It's really, I have a huge home on the North Shore. It's $25,000 per month. I fill that over. Watch everything that I've built on now will change because of that. Pound signs in a cell like this let you know that the numbers can't show, the column needs to be widened. All right, so yes, the beauty here is that when you change any one number, I'll put this to 3,000 just so we can see the columns again, watch how that changes. All your numbers change accordingly. It's dynamic. That's why you don't want to put the numeric value in a cell. That's why you want to put a cell reference. All right, I hope I answered that for you on that point. Everybody good with that? So good, so far so good? Any questions at this point on what we've covered? All right, cool. So other things that we can do with and here I just, if you want, you can pull this over just to make sure everything matches. Notice I've made these changes. I've added my income. We've figured out how much we're going to save, how much we had left over, how much we're going to bank. I'm going to save it. So remember, the first time I saved it, I used the save as command because I had to provide a name and a location for it. This time, what I'm going to do is just click the disk. This is, if you hover over the disk, it's a floppy disk, you can just click on it and it will automatically save. Notice up here, it will say home budget file saved. So now if I shut down, it automatically will save all of these things we did. All right? Key to know that. So if you want to do, so some of the other things that you may want to do, you may want to insert a column. So we talked about, changing the width, highlighting them and so forth. But let's talk about if we wanted to insert. For instance, maybe you wanted to put another column in front of column A. All you need to do is highlight the column that you want to put it in front of. You could put and click insert. Because my whole column was highlighted, the system automatically knows to insert a column. The same is true for a row. Say, for instance, I highlight row 2, I click insert, it automatically inserts a blank row above that row I had highlighted. To delete, needless to say, these are architecture. Again, remember, these are architecture buttons. If I wanted to delete a column, I simply would highlight the whole column, say delete. Because the column was deleted, it knew enough to delete the whole column. Same is true for a row. I can highlight that row, hit the delete button. Everybody good?
We did actually have a question in the chat. Cynthia was asking, what is a cell reference?
A cell reference is literally the cell name. It's when if I'm clicking on this cell here, the cell reference is C3. It's the intersection of the column and the row where the data resides. So when I look at this formula down here, I see that the cell reference is B9. In other words, my active cell is B9. And this particular formula includes cell reference B3 plus cell reference B4. So it really is just how you address a cell. I wouldn't call this by what's in it. I call this cell B3. So that's the cell reference. It's the position of the cell on the worksheet. All right, so now that you know all of this, I'm just going to quickly show you how you can build something rather quickly with what you have learned tonight. So here's my sheet 1. You can name sheets as well by simply double clicking on it. So just as you gave your file a name, you can give your sheet a name. So here I'm going to double click on it. It's highlighted, it's in replace mode, and I'm just going to call it 2021 because that's the budget for next year. The plus sign here, when I click the plus sign here, remember I told you about the green ledger sheets and that it will add another sheet? That's what the plus sign does. If I keep clicking that, I keep getting more sheets. 2021 was sheet 1, it stays in that position. I'm going to go to sheet 2. So just to reiterate how to use some of the stuff you've learned on that first sheet, I have an example. We have a membership. The membership for a region, so we're going to talk on a region, is $10,000. And within our region, we have 4 groups. So let's talk about, we're going to start label those. So the cost for the region for a membership is going to be $10,000. Our regions are made of groups, and our group has a fee of $50. So for every group in your region, you have to pay $50. So I'm going to format these as money. And then I don't want the decimal points. I'm going to get rid of them. I'm going to sum it so I know what I totally have to give the vendor for the total amount. So I'm going to owe $10,050 to get my districts or my groups in this membership. So I'm going to start with my labels. So I have groups, and my groups are District 1, and I'm going to fill that down. Notice it picked up the pattern immediately. I'm going to put in how many members each group has. So for instance, District 1 has 150 members, District 2 has 25, District 3 has 75, and District 4 has 90. For a total number of members, again, I'm not going to say equal plus, plus, plus. Realize my sum function will do that for me automatically. So in a matter of seconds, I have my entire membership of the people I need. Now, those groups don't want to pay, don't want to take the 10,000 divided by 4. They want to do it per member. So they're going to do it per capita, which means you, as the creator of this, you have to build a formula. So you need to do a percent per group. How do you do a percent? Really, really easy. You start off the cell with what? Formula. So there's my equal sign, and it's going to take, I'm going to take the number of my members, and now I'm going to divide it by, divide it by this cell. Now here's a new function for you here. Because I wanted to always see just this cell reference, which is B1, I'm going to make it an absolute cell reference. So here I always wanted to look one cell over, but for the divisor, I always want it to go here. So I do that by putting dollar signs around the reference. When I put dollar signs around the reference, watch what happens when I copy it down this time. So right now I click that in. I think I did it backwards, didn't I? Whoops. Let me see something. What happened here? My system's freezing on me. Let's do this. Equal that. I don't think this. No. Huh. So, in order to get the true number, I'm going to take my members and divide it by that number. But it's not supposed to be dollar signs. This is interesting. It's picking up the dollar sign up here. So I'm just going to take that off for a moment because it's not supposed to be. Oh, you know why? This represents this here. I'm doing it backwards. Sorry, folks. This I'm going to take the 150 and divide it by my total, not the 10,000, to figure out the percent I have. So that's the true form here. So in order for District 1 to have a true representation of the 150, for the 150 members, it's going to pay a percentage of whatever the charge is. Their percent, the 150, represents 44%. And I'm going to minimize my percent and then make it look like a percent. When I was talking about that number here, I wanted always, the second part of this here, I always wanted to look at this 340. The 340 is located in C10. So that's when I put those dollar signs around it. And I'm going to lock it in. And now when I copy that down, notice I'm going now to District 25. District 25, their number is located in C7. And because I put dollar signs around C340, it automatically looks at the group to give me the correct percentage. And if you want to double check it, you can click here, again, do the sum to make sure, in fact, you have 100%. And now you know that you can easily figure out how much it's going to cost this group. So we're going to charge district 44% of that 10,000. So again, it's another user defined, it's another formula. I'm going to put an equal sign, and I wanted to take $10,000, whatever's in cell B1, and again, because I wanted to always stay there, I wanted to always be referenced, I'm going to put those dollar signs around it, and I wanted to multiply it out by District 1's percentage. I'm going to lock that in, and sure enough, they're going to pay $4,411.76. I'm going to drag that down. And then here I can do the sum again to see, yes, in fact, it's 10,000. I would then put dollars here so you guys know that it's dollars and write down to the, the penny. So these are how to build your own formulas. You can do that with using percents, your multiplier, your divider. All right, and notice in a very, very short period of time, you can figure out how to do that. Any questions? I know it's a lot to offer, a lot to have, but it really is just a second application on how to use your functions and formulas to build whatever it is you need to build. I'm going to save it just to make sure I don't lose that addition of the sheet and that other information that we provided. And any questions? How's everybody doing? I know it's 8:30 at night and sometimes that can be a little heady. All right, so I'm just going to finish up that one sheet that I told you there's a group fee. So here is your formula that you built. Equal whatever you want it to permanently always go to this. That's what the dollar signs represent. I always want it to go to B1. Notice always go to B1 and then pick the column to my left. Always go to B1, then pick the column to my left. That's how you can build something without having to type it in multiple times over. The beauty of that, say the cost for the region is really $1,500. Watch the percentages after I hit the enter key. Everything, the percentage will stay the same because it's still to the group, but the cost went up because it's all tied into grabbing this percent of that number. You can add to it. So for instance, every one of them, this is the percent they have to pay, but notice you also have a group fee. So I could then modify my formula. Once again, moving up to that formula bar, clicking to get the insertion point, and I can now say plus whatever's in this cell. And whenever I wanted to make sure it goes to that cell only, that's when I put those dollar signs in. Again, I only wanted to add B2 because as I modify this one, I have to add $50 to my other districts. And now notice that has now changed. This is supposed to be 50 times 4. So that you get the true value of that. Any questions? Oh, I didn't put the, I did. I'm going to save that again. How are everybody doing? I realize that it's getting late and that I would rather leave a time for a Q&A. So I'm just going to go to the chat to see if anybody is asking. Looks like I answered most of these questions. I got Cynthia's, what is a cell reference? And I hope that previous answer was okay, that you were able to understand what I was talking about. Oh, thank you, Liz. I hope so. I hope to see you again. I know that we teach different levels of this. This is our intro. We do have an intermediate, and I'm not sure, Jenna, if that's planned or scheduled. But thank you very much for everybody coming to the intro. And if everybody's okay, then I'm going to hand it back to Jenna so that she can add whatever you would like to say, Jenna, to the class.
Yep, absolutely. I'm just going to stop our recording because that is all finished now.